Hey everybody, welcome back to Elephants of Plenty. This is Bob. I got a message for you today. What I wanted to discuss today was a problem in going to church and being a Christian is you hear a lot of great things about great people in the past. That's one of the great things about being a Christian. There's so much heritage. What's that statement, standing on the shoulders of giants? Well, how true that is. When I first got saved, everything obviously was new, even though I was 26, 27 years old. I went to Latin school, and we studied Latin every year. And I went in there in the 7th grade. I was 12 years old, and you had to get on that train trolley 2-3 miles. And I do remember somebody with a Bible open in the back, a black man, and he looked at me, and he turned, and he spoke to me. I always remember that, sir. If you ever watch this video, thank you. I was only 12 years old. I didn't get saved for another 15 years. But they taught us Latin based on basically translating the Aeneid by Virgil. And let me try to think what else. But, why not have us translate the Vulgate, right, to English? That would have been a little bit more practical. I mean, the Aeneid, it was, it didn't really register, didn't resonate. And we quickly didn't like Latin at all. In fact, later on, I found out one of the educators who proposed Latin be taught in curriculum. This is around when Dewey was around. Her name was Dorothy something or other, but she said the reason we taught them Latin is to get the kids to think critically. I don't understand that at all, because that's not what was told to me. But I kind of digress a little bit. What I wanted to talk about was standing on the shoulders of giants is such a incredible amount of writings that have come down to us through the years. Now, you'd hear these people, though. Here's my thing is, there's no built-in go-to person, or in every community should have somebody who is acquainted with these, and it should be a pastor. Your pastor should have a grip on who these people are and get you to grow a little bit by reading some of these authors, Martin Luther, Charles Spurgeon, right? A.W. Pink. These are great Christian writers. G.K. Chesterton, great writer. C.S. Lewis, great writer. I heard these names, all right, and I still aren't familiar with everybody I just mentioned, okay? I do have a book on Luther. I'm not into him like my friend. He's very much into Luther, and he shares with me a lot. He actually bought me the Luther book by Eric Metaxas, and I have read it. Coincidentally, the last word in that book is Maranatha, and that's a word me and my friend, he just discovered himself. I had known of the word a long time ago. So my message today is we need to find ways to discover why these people are great. Why is Spurgeon great? I heard of Spurgeon. I heard him for many years, never knew why he was great, right? Even a guy like Chuck Colson of the 20th century, or Francis Schaeffer. of the Labrie series in Switzerland. Actually, I spoke. I spoke not very well. I mean, I was a little nervous at one of the Labries here in Boston about 10 years ago. And it was on Emily Dickinson. It's probably the most nervous speaker they ever had, but nevertheless, I don't know how it ever came to be, but I told them they should do something on Emily. Emily, to me, is a Christian writer. Incredibly powerful Christian writer who speaks with the economy of words, but what tremendous power and insights and appreciation. You know, one of her famous Sewell, he was one of the biographers, and there's so many critics have spoken highly of Emily, you know, and they talk about her genius in multiple. She gave unparalleled rendering to the great themes of love, joy, eternal life, nature. She was an expert botanist, death, of course, all these themes. She was an expert in Shakespeare. And I'm going to do a thing on Emily. I can't believe I've never done I don't think I have done a video on Emily yet. Oh, that's going to be a good one. She is the greatest. Safe in alabaster chambers of the meek members of the resurrection. You know. See if I can remember some of those. Unto me, Jesus, I do not know you. Where may be your house? You know, that's another one. And that's about her talking to Jesus. And at the end, Jesus is into paradise. So today I want to discuss a little bit about, all right, let's get back to, like, just for example, Spurgeon. All right, Spurgeon, somebody I heard of, okay? Spurgeon turns out to be one of the most amazing guys Christians God used. You know, he was saved in a snowstorm, a massive blizzard, and he went, you know, he's taking shelter in a primitive Methodist church. He was only 16 years old, and when he goes in there, he sits in the back row, and the pastor doesn't show up. You know, I don't know any churches around, if the pastor doesn't show up, they still go ahead with the service. I can't think of one, but they did it. And the guy who got up, you know, he preached on Isaiah 45:22 was the verse. And, you know, it was this big old snowstorm. He goes in there for shelter. He's sitting in the back row. And the guy, he had spoken broken English. And he's preaching on Isaiah 45:22. I don't know if he's ever done it in his life, but he's talking about that verse. And if you look at that verse, it says, you know, look unto me, all ye ends of the earth. Simple. That's it. And he starts out with, you know, obey my text, you know, look, you know, you don't have to go to college. You don't have to go to Latin school. You don't have to even graduate. You know, some of the smartest people I've ever met never graduated high school. And, you know, I still have, even recently I had a nightmare about not being able to write my midterm or whatever final project in time and neglecting it. I don't know, it's just always going to be there. I think I got that from college, though. But anyway, so Isaiah 45:22, obey my test. So he points to Spurgeon in the back row, and he says, you there, you know. And he points and he says, obey my text. Look, this is what you can do, what you got to do. So Spurgeon was searching. He was searching because he didn't feel saved. He thought he was saved. He wasn't sure. But that one moment he was fully converted and finally believed. And the rest is history. 5 years later, I mean, you would never see a Christian today at age 21 be given a big old church, all right? You know, youth group, we need to have preacher clubs so we can see if kids have gifts of preaching and desire, and the Spirit is working within them, and give them something good to do, you know? But no, we kids, you know, pastors are very narrow-minded. I love pastors. They, you know, don't get me wrong, we need pastors. We need them to have their free speech. The 501c3 is taking it all away. But my point is that we need to let the kids grow too, because we're going to lose the kids, and we got to get them into the Bible and let them preach the Bible. Like a Billy Graham, 15 years old, at a Bible camp, he was told he was going to be preaching that night. He didn't volunteer. So the rest is history. But Charles Spurgeon, you know, 21, he ends up becoming like the greatest pastor of the 19th century, and he's written the most of any Christian writer, that's for sure, and probably any writer, period. I have, you know, his sermons were in multiple volumes, like 12 or 15 volumes. I do have some of his sermons. So, that's somebody. My point is that I heard these names, but we have nobody to fan the flames to let people know who these really. So that's what my video here today is, just to let you know who he is. But another guy is C.S. Lewis, who I always heard about, right? You know, there's like 3 or 4 books that I can think of, and I read. You know, he died the same day as JFK, but they're always saying, "Oh, he's this great apologist," you know. And I, of course, when I first got saved, I was reading Mere Christianity, and that's a tough book to get through. I'm sorry. I mean, it's supposedly he thought of himself as a layman of laymen. You know, and obviously he's done the Chronicles of Narnia writings, as well as multiple, you know, Screw Tape Letters, right, or Wormwood, and he's got a great, you know, he was a professor, medieval, whatever language, medieval and Renaissance English literature at Cambridge University. And the greatest book I think he wrote, that touched me up until the last couple of weeks, and I wanted to show something that also is impacting me now, and that's why I want to have this video, because it impressed me so much, because I haven't really been able to make him mine, if you will, C.S. Lewis, okay? Like Spurgeon, I got right into the morning and evening devotionals. That really, oh my goodness, but it was only 10 years after the fact, after I got saved, you know, like early 2000s, like 2000, 2001, something like that. I was saved like 8 years. But I'd heard of Spurgeon all along, but, you know, nobody, you know, now I guess we got the internet and what have you, but we need people to talk up, you know, at coffee hour after church. This is what kinds of stuff we should be talking about, okay? But A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis, I thought was an amazing book about his wife dying. He married very late. I think he was in his 50s, and he married this woman, and then she dies, you know, soon afterwards, and talks about that relationship, and that's a powerful book. So if you ever want to read a book about suffering and anguish and remorse, A Grief Observed and Loss. But this book, I just discovered it. I was over, I forget where, I was at Brookline, and the Booksmith, and I, you know, went underneath to the used bookstore. I was looking for a used bookstore, and the one I always used to go to was long gone. I hadn't been over there, I couldn't believe it, like 10 years. But time goes by, and I was like, oh well, let's just walk up to Coolidge Corner, and then I didn't want to go to the new books, so I was just walking by, and I was like, oh yeah, they got it downstairs. Is that used bookstore? Oh yes, it is. So I went downstairs. It was like a kid in a candy store, you know. And they had the Inferno, Paradise, all these. That's the first thing I grabbed, right? And I had copies of this before, but it turned out I ended up with $10, so I put the Inferno back because I figured I can get those at another time, and all the Dante books back. But I ended up with like 6 or 7 selections. But this is the book I wanted to talk about today. It's C.S. Lewis, God in the Dark. What I wanted to tell you about, the intro, the preface, the intro, it really helps you understand where this comes from. So it's a collection of magazine articles and letters, theological letters. How does he put it? Letters that dealt with theology. And I'm not doing it justice. But the compiler here is a gentleman named Walter Hooper. And this came out May 1970, so that would be 7 years after JFK passed away. And some of the stuff is unpublished, but the whole thing about C.S. Lewis, C.S. Lewis? You always hear about Lewis is this, what? Great writer, yes, but apologist, right? And I'm like, well, I guess maybe Christianity's it, but it was kind of over my head at the time, when I was reading it. But this really is good. This little book, it's a smaller scale based articles. I think there's 50 or so in here, and they discuss a lot of it's about, miracles, the supernatural, and he's really got a understanding of what was going on to people who were Christians, who didn't believe in the supernatural, who really weren't Christians, the unbelievers who wouldn't believe in Christianity. One of his points here in one of the articles is that the gospel, you can't turn down the gospel if you've never really heard it. And that's like the biggest problem, is people haven't heard it. And that's definitely a problem. And one of the articles is called God in the Dark, but it's summarized. He gets into the modern translations of the Bible. That's an excellent one. I just couldn't believe what I discovered when I. So this is a great way to learn about C.S. Lewis. And God in the Dark is like, God is like kind of in the dark. He's controlled, by man, and I think that's what he's saying here, and that he's trying to break God free by communicating the gospel and being an apologist. I think that's what the gist of the book is. But religion and science. That's a great chapter. There's a couple chapters about that. How myth became fact. I read that one, and the little red, horrid red things. Then there's answers to questions on Christianity that goes about 15 pages. There's dogma in the universe, and these are all different articles. A whole article on miracles. He also wrote a book, I believe, on the same title, Evil in God. So that's interesting. See if I can come up with something here. So my point is, if you really want to learn a little bit about C.S. Lewis, you got to read this book, because then you understand why he was called an apologist. You get appreciation of, a lot of these writings have never been published before. Plus, the research when they were published, this gentleman Hooper had to go digging, extremely, at great cost and time, and you probably couldn't recover these writings right now. They're probably long gone. And some of them, like I said, have never been published, if I can remember which one was never published. Yeah, and they had the Socratic Club, which was at Oxford, and he was like the first president, and that they brought unbelievers in to challenge the Christians, and Christians would challenge the atheists. So there's a whole article or two in here based on that. I can't tell you how much I love this book, and it's going to take me a while to get through it, but just discovering it alone in reading what I have, I just couldn't contain myself and had to let people know about it. Because C.S. Lewis is somebody we always hear about, but we need to make him our own. And God in the Dark, compiled by Mr. Hoover. I'll just run through some of the tables of contents, but I want to get this fellow's name right. Walter Hooper of Jesus College, Oxford. He says, Lewis struck me as the most thoroughly converted man I ever met. Christianity was never for him a separate department of life, not what he did with his solitude, not even, as he says in one of his essays, what God does with his solitude. His whole vision of life was such that the natural and supernatural seemed inseparably combined. Because of this, I have included in his collections his numerous semi-theological essays on topics such as the proposed ordination of women and vivisection. He's one of the themes here is he read the thing on religion, and he believed that the Chronicles of Narnia are an example of this. Is that it's great to have writings that are Christian based instead of just going after people with the apologetic of that they here's the Trinity, here's why you should believe the doctrines, and then his idea was just to get cultural things out there that are based in Christianity, and that is a powerful way to get the gospel message out there. And you could see how he came up with that. So that's how that Chronicles of Narnia came about, and Screw Tape Letters came about. He thought everyone would have a great better chance of converting people if we could make Christianity second nature to stories. So that's it for this little video. Again, the book is C.S. Lewis. Well, it's a nice picture of him. God in the Dark. I really feel a lot more connected to C.S. Lewis right now than before. Because you always hear all these people running around talking about Spurgeon, talking about Lewis. There was a great book when, I think I mentioned, Lewis died. Huxley died, and who's the other one? JFK. One's a Catholic, one's a Christian, and one's like a atheist. And Peter Kreeft from Boston College, he wrote the book on, a dialogue between the three of them as they were waiting for their judgment. And they all died on the same day. I did read that book. That's a good book. So I was going to do this real quick. Now that I remember, I better do this. Here's some of the table of contents are Evelyn God Miracles, Part 1. Dogma in the Universe. Answers to Questions on Christianity. Myth Became Fact. I mentioned all these. The Grand Miracle. Christian Apologetics. Work and Prayer. Man or Rabbit. I just saw the movie Us. Actually, I didn't see it. I had to walk out of the movie. But the opening scene has a bunch of white rabbits in cages with 3 or 4 brown rabbits. I don't know if there was symbolism there, but Jordan Peele from Key and Peele comedy. It's the second movie. The reason I left the movie was I was sitting there and people kept talking and talking and talking. First I moved, and then I didn't feel comfortable in the theater because I did say something to them. So I left the theater. But so Man or Rabbit, that's interesting. On the transmission of Christianity, miserable offenders, founding of the Oxford Socratic Club, religion without dogma, some thoughts, the trouble with X, what are we to make of Jesus Christ, the pains of animals, is theism important, rejoinder, or to Dr. Pittenger, must our image of God go? The dangers of national repentance, 2 ways with the self, the decline of religion, modern translations of the Bible, revival or decay, before we can communicate, cross-examination, Part 3, Bulgarianism, first and second things, sermon and the lunch. So these are all articles. Christmas, Xmas and Christmas, the humanitarian theory of punishment. What Christmas means to me, delinquents in the snow, is progress possible. We have no right to happiness. And it's about 300 pages, 300 plus pages, and letters finally at the end. So that's the book I've been poking through, and I'm really excited about reading. I wanted to share it today. So I can't believe I found this book. It's amazing. So it looks like I'm going to be learning a lot about C.S. Lewis. So that's my message for today. Thank you for coming by and listening. You can hit the subscribe button or hit the little bell there, and you can get notifications. And that is my message for today. Have a great one. Bye.